think it's pretty late in the day, so I thought I would start off by talking about three things that give most of us in healthcare a panic attack on a regular basis. The first one is the fact that it feels like the healthcare system overall is on a knife's edge, right? Like costs keep going up, we're spending too much, margins are going down, right? It's kind of like that's always one big topic. The second one is that people are kind of pissed off. I assume a lot of people saw the people protesting outside. One of the things that's happened over the last 15 years is that most of our lives have gotten deeply personalized and customized, and such that we feel that the world revolves around us, right? It feels like all the world's drivers coordinate so that there's magically always a few of them that are within 5 minutes to pick me up in case I need to be taken somewhere. But healthcare is stark contrast relative to that. Our experience with healthcare is a very big gap relative to what people expect of us today. And the third one is that the barbarians are at the gates. You know, they're called Apple, Google, Amazon, Berkshire, et cetera, half of Silicon Valley. And I think for most of us in this space, depending on which aspect of it you're working on, and from the topics of the conversation today, is that we feel that technology is a big part of the solution. But if technology or healthcare follows a similar track as other industries that have been deeply transformed through technology over the last 15 years, if you take retail, transportation, media, one of the things that seems to often be the case is that early on we get really excited about the magic wand nature of technology. We think about AI and machine learning as being the solution to the really hard problems. But when we look back, one of the things that tends to be the case is that it's more the leverage aspect of technology that deeply transformed all these industries. Like Amazon changed retail not because they're much better at ranking what we might want to buy, but just because when I want something, it shows up to my doorsteps in less than 24 hours. That's logistics. That's not machine learning. And in healthcare, I thought I'd share kind of just three perspectives or three areas that are already deeply transformed from a logistics standpoint in healthcare that are more likely to be some of the big sources of like system level transformation over the next few years. So one of the main functions of technology is that it takes things that used to be expensive and painful and make them easy and abundant. And three of these things that in healthcare still feel scarce but actually are becoming much less so are capacity, context, and transactions. So I'll run through a few examples of each one of these. On the capacity side, we're used to everything we do in healthcare as being incredibly expensive, right? The unit of work in healthcare, or the unit of capacity, is by buying buildings and putting people inside them. And then we try to put telemedicine where we just, add a phone on either end, but really we're still sitting, moving people in buildings. One of the big things that is happening right now, I think that is a big kind of aspect of the logistics, is taking parts of what we think of as healthcare and effectively virtualizing them and moving them into these utility types of services. Three examples that are quite diverse, but I think are quite interesting to think about one is if you look at something like PillPack that Amazon acquired about a year ago. It took pharmacy services that normally require us to place buildings next to where people live and turning it more into a utility that can get plugged into a bunch of different applications. Another example that I think is fascinating is a company called Zipline that the founder is going to be talking about later today. Again, taking things that in healthcare that normally require a huge amount of infrastructure and absolving us of that. Another example is with services. So when, for example, my company Color, for genetic counseling, we virtualize that into a service such that we are able to provide it at a higher capacity than any individual hospital in the US right now. The second big area that is quite interesting is when we think about context. When you think about all of the overhead and the effort that we spend, a lot of it is really just reestablishing context. When you show up to a doctor's office, the first thing you do is you get a clipboard to reintroduce yourself. And if we think of that in comparison to other aspects of our lives, right? Imagine if you want to pick up an Uber ride and every time you need to enter where you are and reintroduce yourself, right? And the question is, what does that look like in healthcare? So the interesting thing is that already today, there is more health data, more insight about your health, unless you're an actual kind of in a disease state, outside of the health system and is already on your phone. Like your phone knows whether you're depressed well before it gets entered into the EMR. And the final one that I would like to share is around transactions. We still think of every interaction with the health system as being a high-cost transaction. And the question is, what does it look like when we turn these into microtransactions? You know, it's the difference between buying a car and taking an Uber ride. And when we think of that in the context of healthcare, it's similar to Amazon. Instead of the way they change our behavior is not by making us want to buy more things. In healthcare, we try to change behavior by, we talk about adherence, behavior management, and one of the biggest hurdles is literally just making things easier, just reducing the friction. So in many ways, I think the good news is that it's less than magic that we need and more using the lever that we already have and putting in some elbow grease to hopefully move the world. Thank you very much.